So, John, welcome to the Freedom Pack podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
And mine to be with you.
Okay, so I was thinking when I was preparing for this interview, we live in such a fast-paced world right now. People seem to rush around. You can buy an item online and it arrives at your door within hours. People want everything instant. So, in such a fast-paced world, why do you think it is important for us to slow down sometimes?
Those who have a sense of that there is another world, the spiritual world, and even more so those that get a glimpse of it, or indeed many glimpses of it, so many glimpses of it that it becomes something real, not just theoretical, but actual real. You begin to realize that there are two worlds. There is this unchanging world where there is no rush whatsoever, no coronavirus and no death, what's more. And then you begin to get a perspective of this world, that this world is in fact, as the Bible says, a fallen world. We have fallen from our original and proper status of spiritual beings into this corrupt and mortal world. Now, once you get that bit between your teeth, you see very clearly that the purpose of our life in this world is to recognize it, again, to use a biblical phrase, as a world of sin. In other words, a world of ignorance, where we've lost our true home, which is in spirit. And then the purpose of using a technique such as being still and silent is because this is a very helpful first step, as it were, towards recognizing the existence of an alternative and much better world.
How do you define the word stillness?
Well, this is one of the points, you see, Louis, you can't define it. You cannot define silence or stillness or space, still less spirit. We use these words every day, but nobody knows what they are. At least we know what they are, but you can't define them. Because the moment you define something, you put it in a little box. You limit it within a concept of the human mind. Whereas the essential nature of stillness and silence, and still more so of spirit, is that it is unlimited. Therefore, it's indescribable.
What are some of the ways that you would encourage people to seek out stillness? Is it maybe looking into meditation? If people are listening now and they think that they are one of those people that are always rushing around and, they're very far from stillness, what are some of the tips you would give them to start that journey?
Well, as the Bible says, seek and you will find. Look and search. It's a great blessing to be discontented in this life, because it's this motivation of discontent that urges one to seek for better. And this is the seek. Usually to begin with, most people go to books. If you've got a religious inclination, go to the scriptures. But a lot of people now are searching on the internet. There are any number of people on the internet, wise and not so wise, who are offering their their versions of of an alternative life. So take your pick. Good luck to you.
Yeah, there's plenty out there to sift through, definitely.
Yes. Sorry, I just lost the gist of your question. Have I answered you?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Oh,
We were talking about achieving stillness, and do you think that having a deeper connection and a personal relationship with nature can help bring us closer to stillness?
Let me just go back to the phrase you used just then. I think you said achieving stillness. Now, look, my dear, you cannot achieve stillness because stillness is infinite.
Okay.
How can you achieve the sky?
I see.
All you get is you may become familiar with it. You may become, you may grow in confidence with being still. At first, many people are frankly embarrassed, frightened of being still. To them, it seems that it's not alive. If you're used to a lot of noise and talking and activity in your life. So, yes, but it's something that grows on acquaintance. And now you go on to ask me about nature. Well, one of the great, one of many benefits of being with nature is that this stillness is natural, isn't it? I mean, even if it's only a city park, if you just consider a tree is, in relation to human activity, a tree is still, isn't it? You can put your hands on a tree and feel that stability, that comfort of stillness.
Obviously, this last year might have been more challenging, but are you someone that tries to get out in nature regularly? And what does that look like for you?
Well, fortunately, I live in a small town in the north of England, and I've only got to look out of my window just beyond the computer here to see a lovely hillside and trees and grassy fields and the blue sky beyond. So, and yes, I do go out for a walk every afternoon, and well, I go every morning. I go around the nice park by the river, lovely, surrounded by hills. No, I'm very blessed in that way, and I've been close to nature all my life. I was lucky to work as a farmer, and so I'm soaked and completely at home with the fields and the sheep and all the blessed things that turn green at this time of year.
What would you say the advantages are to speaking less and listening more in everyday life?
You've picked that one up from me, have you?
Of course, I have.
But it's a very, very, very good thing. Do you know, when I was a little boy, my granddad had a favorite saying, "Little boys should be seen and not heard." I think that wouldn't be politically acceptable these days.
Maybe not.
But it went deep into me. But being brought up in the deep country and having spent many, well, perhaps a greater part of my life alone, I soon became very used to being quiet and silent. And I always found a lot of conversation rather bothersome, and I just wanted to get away from it, really. Yes, just to speak less and listen more. Well, the trouble with speaking is that we don't listen. Either to the person you're speaking to or even more importantly to the voices of nature. You know, the real voices. I mean, if I just look out at the hillside opposite me, is it speaking to me? Well, not in a loud voice, but it has a sort of silent voice, doesn't it? I look out at the sky, it's speaking to me, isn't it? It's communicating, but not with words. But the trouble is, if one is all the time chattering in one's own self, you sort of blind yourself. You lose your awareness of the greater world around you.
What does meditation look like for you now, in your experience? How do you best meditate?
Not such an easy question, my dear, because meditation, well, I started meditating nearly 60 years ago when I was 26 years old. And I've been practicing twice a day ever since. And all through that time, it develops. So I could give you a different answer at every year throughout this long, long process. What does it look like? Well, I suppose now it's become so fused into my everyday experience. It's hard to say where it begins or ends, but just going back to how I started this interview, referring to the other world, the beyond, which isn't really other than this. It's simply as much a part of this world as the sky is. It's sort of, it's a dimension of which we're not normally aware. Just like the sky is always here enfolding us within its influence. Also as spaces, and the silence is always present. You know, in the noisiest of situations, if you just listen, you'll hear silence beyond words. And you've only just got to, watch a crowd of people to realize they're all moving within this sort of invisible space, aren't they? They're like performers on a stage. This invisible, this silent and invisible world is with us all the time. This interview is conducted actually within a context of silence and of unlimited silence and space, or if you like to call it spirit. This is this unseen, unheard dimension, which actually, once you begin to realize this, which means bringing it into reality, it immediately gives you a sort of an alternative, a sort of third point, as it were, to the seesaw, you and me duality of this world. And it just makes it brings a wholeness into the situation, a stability, a peace, no matter how chaotic the world is, a sort of confidence, no matter how we worry about how our performance is going in this world. For example, before this interview, I knowing I'm going to be put on the spot, I sort of make a little bit extra effort to connect with that. So I have that reassurance that it's all going to be, as it were, contained within something that is unshakable and absolutely sure. And then I'm less likely to say something stupid, aren't I? With a bit of luck.
If there are maybe young people listening now, who are thinking to themselves that they've convinced themselves that meditation always has to be something to do with religion. Maybe these people aren't religious. Can they still get benefits from meditation?
Absolutely, my dear. Oh, it's all these questions. They just move on a bit and they just become laughable. Yes, don't worry about being religious. I had a typical education. I went to a school where we had compulsory chapel every day, and so for 10 years I had scripture lessons, no choice about it. I was brought up in the Christian tradition, and I'm always grateful for it because I'm familiar with the Bible and the prayers and the language of religion. But then when I left school and didn't have to attend, well, I started exploring further other religions than that, like many people do. But I still, that language is very much in me. And I remember immediately after I was taught to meditate, and after my very first practice or two, when I began to get a sense of it opening up beyond thinking mind, I thought, well, wow, this is what religion is talking about. This is spirit. This is the kingdom of God. Well, previous to meditating, these words were just words to me. They meant nothing. I didn't know what it was in practice. And what meditation did, it made spirituality practical. It wasn't belief, it was practical experience. That's what makes the difference, my dear. It's not belief, it's not thinking, it's real practical experience, just like looking out of the window at the sky. You don't need to read a book to learn to see, to be told the sky is there. You just look and it's there, isn't it? In the same way, when you meditate, you begin to realize that this stillness, this silence, this other dimension to life that we're not aware of normally is actually really and truly there and can be experienced. Easy.
Picking up on another theme you have covered on your YouTube channel. I've been a follower, a subscriber of your channel this past year. I think some of the content on there is amazing. And there was one video where you talked about pain, and I'd love you to maybe share some of that advice with our audience now. So in your experience, what is your experience and relationship with pain, and how does that affect your relationship with the world, as you say?
I know a lot about pain. My goodness. First of all, physical pain. I was a farmer and I first had a major injury to my back when I was 21. I've lived with pain for most of my life. Now in old age, I have to live with arthritic pain. Well, sorry, you said how did pain affect my relationship to the world? Well, like most old people would say, that's life, isn't it? You're lucky if you can get through life without pain. If one thing doesn't hurt, it's usually something else. So you get a sort of acceptance of it. But of course, far worse is mental pain, the suffering that we go through in our minds, over all sorts of things. Suffering for the destruction of nature, or most people have an experience of suffering over lost love, don't we? And absolutely heartbreaking pain. And then what about the awful pains of depression? Oh my God, I know all about that. Well, looking back, at the time, of course, you don't see it, but looking back, you rather come to see these things as blessings in disguise, because they teach you. We do learn through pain. We learn through our suffering. For one thing, we learn that is a condition of this world, which, again, to relate back to what I've ever said, is this world of sin. This world that is not the real world, this fallen world, which is not the real human condition. And as you get a strengthening realization of the fact that an alternative world exists, and as that becomes more real, then you're much more able to accept the sufferings of this world. Death is very real until you experience immortality. When immortality becomes obvious to you, in fact more obvious than mortality, then all the fuss the world makes about trying to procrastinate and prevent people dying becomes, the wind goes out of the sails a bit, really. I wouldn't say it's pointless, but it's much more important. If you think back in history, we don't use the term now, to save the soul. Well, to save the soul means to bring to the forefront of experience this the fact of immortality. Well, when your confidence of immortality is greater than your experience of mortality, well, then you get a different point of view, don't you? The sufferings of this life seem, well, lawful. The law. This is, when man first, it's all, whether you're religious or not, is a remarkable description of all this in the first chapters of the Bible. You see, when man first turned away from his first home, which was in paradise, and fell, he fell in consciousness from a higher state of consciousness to a lower state of consciousness. And this is the human condition. And as God said to man, the wages of sin, the wages of falling from higher consciousness, which is immortal, to lower consciousness, which is mortal, is death. There we are. There we have death and pain. It is a natural consequence of being in the wrong place, of being absent from the presence of God in a world of corruption.
My next question was going to be advice you would give to people who may face existential worries about maybe death or losing someone they love and having anxiety over that. But I think you've answered it fantastically just there. But on that note, what advice can you give on grief, and what is your approach to grief?
Well, you suffer it. It's a fact of life, isn't it? We all have grief. Oh my God, terrible grief from childish tears for your pet rabbit or a mouse or something that dies. Oh, indeed, tears. This world is called a veil of tears, isn't it? This is part of the human condition. We are lost in this world, and this world is full of tragedy. This world isn't a joyride, I assure you. Of course it isn't, because we are absent, well, to use the same phrase again, absent from the presence of God. What is my attitude towards it? Well, it's only now really in old age that I can speak with such confidence, because it's a long, long, long process of realizing the fullness of, first of all, man's potential, and then the consequences of this absence, which is the cause of all our trouble. Now, I don't feel the same sort of grief like I used to, of course. I wouldn't say it's completely from my experience. I suppose I feel more compassion for those that are feeling it, because I know that at other stages of my life, I know all about tears. Goodness me. Veil of tears indeed. Grief. Jesus is described as a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, isn't he? One of the classic descriptions in the Old Testament. Yes, I think the more you realize the lost and the sinful, the fallen estate of man, the more pitiful it becomes, and the more you feel the pain of it. Compassion compels you to take on your own shoulders the suffering of others, which one does in this world, of course. Like you take on the suffering of anyone you love when they're in trouble. You want to comfort them, but so often they won't accept it, will they? They turn away, say, because in a strangely perverse way, people love their suffering. It sort of gives them validity, doesn't it? I'm the most unhappy person in the world. I've thought that. My God, I have.
In the world right now, I think a lot of young people are very obsessed with this idea of being successful. Maybe it's their career. They're always driven by these things. In your experience throughout, the years you've lived on this planet, what are the things that mean the most in life?
Well, see, it varies, doesn't it? When you're young, it's usually something physical, isn't it? Climbing a mountain or winning a gold medal or winning the girl of your dreams. These are what matter most. And then it evolves throughout life. What matters most? When I was 26 and first approached a school of meditation, I asked them to teach me. They asked me, what do you really, really want in life? And rather to my surprise, I answered, God. Well, I'm not sure really what I meant by God then. I'm not sure that I really know what I mean by God now, but I've got a bigger idea. I think I have a bit more experience than I had when I was 26. You see, these things, they grow. They're infinite. And one's whole concept of the infinite grows and grows. We start off thinking love. Of course, we all want to love and be loved, and we think in terms of a particular girl. And if you were fortunate enough to have that gift, then it's absolutely wonderful. Unfortunately, very often our love experience is yesterday and no tomorrow, isn't it? So we're distraught and grieving and suffer over that. And then, well, as happened in my experience, we gradually begin to expand our whole concept of love to something that is actually bigger than a particular woman's love. It's something infinite. It's a very big step indeed to think in terms of the love of God, although we may get glimmerings and tastes of it quite early on in life. But certainly love, like all the big things, freedom and peace, are infinite. They have no end. And where does one experience begin and the other? Where does one experience end and the other begin? They seem tend to merge into one another. The whole thing gets bigger as one gets older. Again, I'm sorry, I've rather wandered from the question, haven't I? I can't quite remember what it was.
Oh, it's perfect. It's perfect. I'll pick up and sort of tie in the next question. And as we start to wind down this interview, one of the last things I really wanted to ask you, I know it's quite a tough question, but in your experience, what makes a life worth living?
Oh, what makes a life worth? It's finding the infinite, you see, finding God. You don't have to call it God, of course, but find the infinite, you see. And that can never fail.
Oh.
And see, that is infallible. And that's what makes life worth living. Yes. Infallibility. Yes. Don't worry about this old body of mine, I'm just a little boy with a grey beard, and this infinite adventure, it just goes on and on. It just gets better and better. That's right. That's what it's all about. Reach for the stars, my dears. And don't be satisfied with anything less.
We've talked a lot today. I want to give you the chance to let these guys watching or listening right now know where they can find out more about yourself and where they can. I know you've written quite a few books. If they're interested, where can they go to find the books and more about yourself, John?
Well, we've got a website. Are you going to put this on the podcast?
Absolutely, I will leave the link.
Yes, it's we're actually changing the website, bringing it up to date, so don't get maybe irritated by it. But if you go to the end of the whatever they call those things at the top, you know, there's their books, big details of books there. There are 8 books, and so far there's another couple in the pipeline, but they're written 100% from my own experience. There's no quoting from other people. There's no theory about them. And they describe this life full of mistakes, full of despair and suffering and ups and downs. But it's genuine and it's straight from experience. And I hope it'll be encouraging to anybody to soldier on and never give up. And as I say, reach for the stars. And God bless you all.
Amazing. I will, of course, leave the links to those books in the description of the podcast. John, yes. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've been a fan of your work for some time now. And it means a lot to speak to you myself. And yeah, you've brought a lot of value to our audience today. And for that, I thank you so much.
Thank you so much indeed, Lewis. It's been a pleasure.
Here we are.